Welcome everybody to tonight's DFS slate on the Football Diehards. I am here with Eric Romoff. My name is Jamie Calandro at JAC3600. He is Fantasy Nav. We are your co-pilots for this flight to DFS success or something thereof. Breaking down the Week 14 slate this time. I can't believe we've come that far, and this is the last week of bye weeks. So we've got a tidy little 10-game slate to bring you today. We've got some definite injuries to discuss and the ramifications of that, and some really big-time games to stack and some underpriced people coming back. So, Eric, how's it going on your end? Did you have a successful week in Week 13 for DFS?
I was just barely on the wrong side of even in Week 13. I had a couple of builds that got a little bit of run to them, but they were in some of my smaller contests. So, in this world, especially playing GPPs, not too mad walking away, close to breaking even.
Oh yeah. I mean, breaking even, like the casinos, like we say, breaking even is a win. If you don't let them take your money, then you're ahead of the game. I had a good week. Cash hit. And the cash lineup that I always put in GPPs also found its way into the money line, so it's a successful week there. I'm going to be honest. I am curious on your thoughts this week because when I wrote my early articles on Tuesday for Fantasy Pros and even the Thursday articles that came out on Football Diehards, ownerships were just starting to come out, and honestly, usually I have a pretty good sense of it beforehand, you know what I'm saying? And, once the ownerships kind of settle in, I'm like, yeah, that's kind of how I figured it is. It kind of validates the writing. I was dead wrong in those early write-ups this week on how this slate was going to look. And I've pretty much had to start over and scratch a lot of the stuff that I believed in. So I'm kind of, as we get there, I'm kind of going to throw these names at you, and I'm curious to see where you were on all week and why you think I might have been wrong on some of these guys, namely Tyler Huntley. This is the one that we'll get to this game later on in the show, but I thought Tyler Huntley was going to be mega chalk this week at 5,500 being, basically Lamar Jackson light with the rushing upside. It seems that nobody's on him. Everybody's on the Pittsburgh defense. I understand the game is got a 36 over under and it's cold there, but when we get to, we'll put this on the back burner for now, and we'll go down the line for these games. But when we get to that Pittsburgh-Baltimore game, I'm curious on your thoughts there, because there were a couple other players that didn't settle in for me like that as well. You ever have that happen?
Yeah, all the time, right? Specifically, whenever there is a player that is underpriced who is coming off of a ceiling game. I mean, I always expect them to push for kind of top 5 in rostership on any given slate, and many times they don't. Oftentimes they're still popular, but that's definitely a case where I find myself sort of overestimating how popular a player will be.
Yeah, and I'm going to kind of use that as a little bit of segue into our first game here. And, again, we're a little bit of housekeeping before we get into the slate. We're live on YouTube right now. Thank you for everybody that's listening to us. Feel free to post your questions into the chat. We'll kind of, intersperse them in as we get throughout the show. What we do is we'll break down every game for this slate, or at least try to. Usually we're pretty successful in that. Sometimes we get hung up on the main games, but we do have 10 only 10 games on this one, so we should be able to get to everything and your questions. So I'm going to segue that little Huntley intro to a similarly priced quarterback and our first game that we have on the slate and that everybody is going to be on in some form, and that is Detroit, Minnesota, which is sporting the highest over-under on the slate by far. I think we're at 51.5 right now. We're at 52. It's got the potential to even climb a little bit, I think, as people are betting this game with comparison to the other ones. So I'm going to start with Jared Goff because he is essentially the same price as Huntley, and he's $5,600. He's $100 more, coming off a game where he put up 24.6 DraftKings points. and he is the one that is showing the high rostership at that level here. He's actually coming in at about quadruple the ownership of Huntley. So, are you okay with that? You know, as the cash quarterback, the highest rostered quarterback right now for us on the slate on DraftKings, are you okay plugging in Goff for cash? And how would you approach the Lions passing game in GPP?
Yeah, I think I'm fine with it. I mean, look, 5.6K is such a negligible price point, right? Like, there's so many ways that he can get to value there to where I feel pretty comfortable with him in a cash context. You know, from a tournament perspective, I would like to see that slide down. It's funny because you open, kind of positing the question about Huntley, and the answer, I think, really lies in both of the quarterbacks for this game, right? Goff is drawing a lot of rostership. Cousins is looking to be drawing a lot of rostership. For what it's worth, I'll take the discount on Goff. In terms of who to pair him with, Amon-Ra St. Brown, anytime that he's sub 8.5 or so, he's going to be a really solid point per dollar option. The question is really who's the second piece that you go for there. We were obviously both really bullish on the pricing and the circumstance for DeAndre Swift last week, and despite paying that off massively, his price hasn't really changed. So now he's looking to be one of the more popular options. He's certainly in the mix. DJ Chark, still getting a lot of downfield looks. Still getting the ball thrown to him, at or near the end zone. So he should be, certainly considered as a second piece. Honestly, I kind of like going to Jamal Williams more than anything, right? Everyone's going to be chasing the big game from DeAndre Swift last week. Obviously, you don't get nearly as much correlation in the passing game with Williams as you do with Swift, but Jamal Williams has a very large role in this offense, and I think most people are going to be going away from him relative to what we saw Swift do last week.
I like that call. I like that a lot. I think it kind of flips last week's, GPP kind of play on its head. We were high on Swift with all the targets, but Jamal Williams' touchdown rate and his red zone targets or his red zone carries and his even inside the 5 have been astronomical this year. So, even if Swift does hit value, there's no reason that we can't see a 2-touchdown game from Jamal Williams. I'm with you on Amon-Ra St. Brown completely. He's currently my wide receiver 2 overall for the week. I'm even toying with him as the wide receiver 1. I can't bring myself to do it over Jefferson from a raw total perspective, but from a DFS perspective, I love the $1,200 discount. I think their total scores are going to be very similar enough there that discount for cash is something that you have to take. And like you said, in cash, it's always nice you don't have to stack in cash, but it's nice when a wide receiver and quarterback are kind of bringing each other along like that to use Goff in cash. So as of now, I've kind of switched there from the Huntley play to Goff, but I'm still a little bit nervous of the fact that Huntley runs and Goff doesn't. I mean, I guess the answer lies in the game, right? Like the game, it has an over-under of, I think it's 15 points higher than the Pittsburgh-Baltimore game. It's in a dome, whereas the other one's in the cold, and it's in Pittsburgh, and they're going to be rushing Huntley. So I get it. But, it's still kind of it's still one that I can't seem to talk myself into. What about the Minnesota side? I think Justin Jefferson is going to have an unbelievable day. The question is whether or not you were going to pay the $9,000 for him, especially if you're already ponying up $7,800 for Amon-Ra St. Brown. But remember Jefferson's only bad game this year was against the Lions, where somehow Jeff Okudah stuffed him for 3 catches for 14 yards. Was that an aberration? Should Jefferson be paid for in this game? What do you think?
Yeah, I kind of like going back to Jefferson here, largely to do with his rostership, right? You mentioned his first matchup Jeff Okudah did give him some trouble, but I think this time around we see that we see that turned on its head. But also Jefferson moves around the formation a lot, right? So he should only see about a third of his snaps in Okudah's coverage. That means that he'll see some Jerry Jacobs, he'll see some Will Harris. These are guys that are allowing significantly higher catch rates than Jeff Okudah. In Jacobs' case, he's offering better than 1.1 yards per route covered, right? So I think Jefferson's in an interesting spot here to outperform his last time against the Lions. The thing that really jumps off the page for me is Justin Jefferson is going to flirt with single digit rostership yet again, right? So just on principle alone, he needs to be considered anytime that's the case. But also Dalvin Cook is going to be certainly the most popular player in this game, and potentially one of the most popular players on the slate. So if you're getting a guy in Jefferson who very well can and should be the top scoring receiver on the board, and you're getting leverage off of a chalky running back who I think is in kind of a tough spot, those are all things that I love from a tournament context.
Yeah, I'm with you too, and I'm gonna go right to Hawkinson from there too, who I'm having trouble with as well on the slate because I don't know. I mean, I think it's just the cash player in me gets so kind of married to the idea of you have to pay all the way up or all the way down for a tight end in cash. So it's basically Kelsey or punt. Hawkinson is right in the middle at 5,300, but I mean, we'd be remiss if we didn't say that since he's been traded to Minnesota, he's the overall tight end 3 in PPR, which is what DraftKings use, and Detroit has given up the third most fantasy points per game to tight ends. So where are you on Hawkinson on this one?
Yeah, I like him a lot for a lot of the reasons that you mentioned, right? I think generally DFS market thinks about tight ends in that exact fashion. You're going to go all the way up for the safety of a Kelsey, or you're going to try to save salary at the position. So to get into TJ Hawkinson at 5K, 5.1K, he's not going to be very popular. He is an integral part of this offense since he arrived. He's just getting piles and piles of targets week in and week out. The matchup with Detroit, the revenge narrative now, 5th most favorable to opposing tight ends. They allow a 75% catch rate to the position. And don't look now, but the Minnesota Vikings throw a ton in the red zone. I want to say Kirk Cousins is like top 5 in red zone passing attempts this year. Very much so of TJ Hawkinson. So a lot to like, especially in the context of the rostership.
Yeah, I like it too, and I've got to mention Adam Thielen as well, who I hated coming into this season, and he's showing the reasons that I was really not drafting him in season-long teams. But he's down to under 5,000, and if you go on the narrative of, like you said, that they're, or not the narrative, the stats, the actual tangible stats, that they're throwing a lot in the red zone, Thielen is definitely a TD threat in this. I'm a little bit uncomfortable by his rostership, which is high for somebody who has yet to reach 75 yards in a game this year receiving. So I'll ask this one more question about this game before we move on, since you're more the GP player than I am. Where are you on Thielen in GPPs? I think as a cash value, he's fine at his rostership, but does he have the ceiling for GPPs that you're okay using a fairly high rostership? He's coming in with a higher projection for rostership than Jefferson is right now.
So I'm not seeing quite that higher projection, but if it holds true, then certainly that has me wanting to look elsewhere. In terms of his his upside, I mean, it's there, right? They kind of use him more like a tight end in the red zone anyways. Cleaning up my stat from earlier, Kirk Cousins is 2nd in the league in red zone passing attempts. This is the game where they're slated to put up north of 50 points. So if he's coming in kind of the mid or low single digits, I think he's a really interesting way to get into this game in a player who's going to have these high upside looks. But if he's north of Justin Jefferson, or even flirting with top 10, top 15 rostership at the position, that's a position where I'm going to want to be underweight.
Yep. I think we're on the same page there. So that's about Minnesota, Detroit. I think I think there's so many ways to stack this game that you really should. If you're one of the mixed multi-enter players and play, 10, 12, 20 lineups, I think a good chunk of that should be devoted to variations on this game and not just, making it be one of many, because this is the highest stack score if you're counting it that way on both sites, really, even with the half PPR aspect. So I think you got to kind of find a way to get some contrarian plays in there, get some upside plays. You mentioned DJ Chark. I love that call from based on what he did the past week. I think Jamison Williams emerging stands to hurt Josh Reynolds more than he does Chark in this one. So I think, there's some definite iterations you can get from this game. All right, so we're moving on. We're going to go to Cleveland-Cincinnati, which is the second highest total, but a pretty big drop-off. We're looking at a total of 47 right now for this one. And I think we can talk about the Browns and where you are on that one. I'm not really into the Browns at all in this one, but the Bengals certainly have a lot of attractive plays on there. So we'll start right at the top with Burrow. Here's my issue with the Bengals, and I'm interested to see which way you would decide to go. So I think that Joe Burrow is decidedly underpriced, but at 7,000, he's the overall QB4 on the season. He has been putting up massive scores lately. He's got his full contingent healthy with Chase back, who they didn't coddle at all. They were aggressive in getting him touches. That said, Joe Mixon is back too, and you could argue that he is more egregiously priced than Burrow is. The Browns have given up the third most fantasy points to running backs. They just lost Taki, their middle linebacker, who was pretty much the only line of defense at an already bad rush defense. So, I'm all in on both these guys in any format. The problem is, do you play both of them together? And I think with Mixon not really being as involved in the pass game as he could be, it's not like a Goff Swift thing you mentioned before. That's a little bit dangerous as far as upside goes. So how do you approach that? Do you have a preference of, the Bengals passing game versus the Bengals running game in this one? Or, let's say you're playing one lineup and you had to use them. Which way would you go there?
I would probably err on the side of the passing game, largely to do with projected rostership. Looks like Mixon is going to be right up there with Cook in terms of how popular he is tomorrow. A lot of that has to do with pricing, right? He's flatly a player that shouldn't be sub 7K. In terms of playing them together, I don't mind it, right? Mixon isn't as involved as a Swift, like you mentioned, but he's seeing better than 5 targets a game. Number 7 on the year in that rank at his position. So, you can definitely get into some, Joe Mixon stacks with Burrow and another piece here on the Cincinnati side.
Yeah, I would tend to agree too. And I think if you're playing cash, you have to have one of these guys. I think both are way too valuable, way too highly rostered, and relative to the field, underpriced. And I think both is fine. I wouldn't go into a cash lineup with neither of them because I think you're going to be fighting a losing battle there. Because I think they both have an easy path to their floor game. It's the ceiling in GPPs that we can question. So, what about the rest of the passing game here? I think Chase is pretty obvious. How else are you playing a Burrow stack rather than just Burrow Chase, which people are going to be on?
Yeah, it's tough, right? Because you talk about Burrow Chase, you're looking at a roughly $15,000 pairing, which is dramatically different from a Cousins Jefferson or a Goff St. Brown, right? Paying up to get different is always a way to get leverage. So I don't know what you're seeing on your side. I'm seeing Jamar Chase and T. Higgins as the exact same projected rostership right now. that should split as we get into the morning. But trying to find a way to get all three of those together, you're going to be in the low single digit percentile in terms of what part of the field or what portion of the field has that combination. The matchup for the pass catchers is super strong, right? We've talked about Denzel Ward, not having the type of season that we know him to be capable of. He's allowing 68% catch rate. He's allowing better than 15 yards per reception in his coverage. Emerson looks a little bit better on paper, but he actually leads the team in touchdowns that he's surrendered. So there isn't really a bad matchup for any of the pass catchers in Cincinnati. Boyd is in the mix, right? He's going to see a lot of snaps. He should run a decent amount of routes. He's coming off, if memory serves, he's coming off of a performance where he dropped a very easy touchdown pass, right? So that upside is always going to be sitting out there. But really, where I'm looking to stack Burrow, I'm probably going to look to go with a combination of Burrow, Chase, Higgins, Burrow, Chase, Mixon, Burrow, Higgins, Mixon.
All right, awesome. So I'm gonna keep you on the hot seat right now too, because I'm not interested in the Browns in this one, and I'm having an issue with that because I do like Bengals stacks. They've got a team total of 27. I like the way you've done them as well. The problem is coming up with a Browns bring back here. Nick Chubb would seem to be the obvious one, but there's two problems with that. That is adding to an already lofty, price combination there that you mentioned with Burrow and Chase, and also DJ Reader is healthy. So Chubb actually has a really bad matchup here. Then the other one is Amari Cooper, but he did get 9 targets from Watson, but he's banged up and Watson was bad. We can give him a pass on that for not having played in close to 3 years, but he's bad. I don't know what it's going to take, how much reps he needs to get back. So if you have to pick a Browns bring back, is it one of those two or is it someone I'm missing there?
It's one of those two. I'm probably not going to get to Chubb very much. I think the other concern there is game script, right? This is probably a game that he can be, managed out of if Cleveland finds himself down. Amari Cooper would be the clear choice for me, right? You mentioned him getting 9 targets last week with Deshaun Watson. That's 41% target share. Watson didn't throw the ball very much. He had 22 attempts on the game, right? So he seems like a pretty clear choice. The other name that I would mention, and it seems like his availability is somewhat up in the air, is David Njoku. He didn't play last game, so we don't have kind of the sneak preview of whatever rapport may or may not be there with Watson. But last time he was out, he saw 80% of snaps. He ran 30 routes. Had a solid day. He caught 5 for 29 and a touchdown. So, those are the two main pieces that I'm looking to get into as a bring back for the Browns. Honestly, I might be getting a little out over my skis, but I've kind of been playing around with some Brown stacks in the largest of max multi-ender builds that I've got kicking around.
Oh, do tell. How are we doing that one?
Yeah, it's really a leverage consideration, right? Overwhelmingly, the first game we talked about is going to be the most popular on the slate, and I think that this game in particular is one that can be as high scoring, if not more high scoring. The essential question that needs to be answered is whether or not we think last week's performance for Deshaun Watson was rust and difficulty getting back up to game speed, or if it was game script, right? I don't know if I've fully come to a determination on that question or not, but if I land at it being the latter, really interesting way to get highly leveraged in a game that, again, I think can be one of the top scoring on the slate, where there are, both clear stacking options and very clear high upside run back options. These are the arguments that I'm making in my head. Whether or not I get the gumption to actually press the buttons is a different story altogether.
Do it. Do it. No one's going to be on it. I like it. All right, there you have that. Cleveland, Cincinnati. Cool. So we have a few questions in the chat. So before we move on, we'll take a minute to answer those. Ron Dreyer, thank you, is our first one. Always enjoy the show. We appreciate that. I need 2 of these 4 for flex. George Pickens versus Baltimore. Gabe Davis versus Jets. Josh Palmer versus Miami. Darius Slayton versus Eagles. I'll let you take that one first, and I'll lead with the second one. What do you think? Pickens, Davis, Palmer, Slayton.
I'm probably going to scratch off Davis and Palmer there. He needed 2 or 1?
2.
Yeah, I'll scratch off Davis and Palmer there. It looks like both Allen and Mike Williams are expected to be available for this game tomorrow night, I should say. So that, really relegates Palmer's opportunity. And Gabe Davis, he's as streaky, as boom or bust as they get. And this week he gets covered by some combination of Sauce and DJ Reed, which are, both are tremendously difficult matchups. So I'll go with the Pickens side by process of elimination.
I agree, and I will also just throw in on the Davis because I've seen a lot of arguments for playing Davis that, sauce on Diggs, lesser corner on Davis, which I think you broke down right there. I don't know if Diggs is going to be completely on Sauce Gardner there. Diggs is such a good route runner. They could shuffle them around there. And like you said, Reed is no slouch. So I think, especially with weather being a factor there as well, I think this is going to be a lower game than we're used to. So I would tend to agree. Slayton's matchup is no picnic either. Pickens is the only one I feel somewhat comfortable about in that one, but I would agree Pickens, Slayton. All right, the other one we have from the Joker is Ramondre Stevenson, Jamal Williams, Rashad White, Jeff Wilson Jr., Donta Foreman, full PPR pick 2. So first of all, Stevenson is no longer part of sit-start questions, especially in PPR. He's a high-end RB1. You set him in there and you pick around him. Whether Damian Harris plays or not, Stevenson is the guy there. He's an elite running back. So then it comes down to the other one: Jamal Williams, Rashad White, Jeff Wilson, Donta Foreman. Wilson's out of that one for sure, even in a good matchup for me, unless Mostert doesn't play. I haven't seen anything that says that. Let's see. So this is a difficult one, actually. I'm going to probably throw out White with Fournette playing there in a 50-50. I go Foreman, even in the PPR setting. He should get the full workload. I think the other two are sharing enough. What do you think about the second one?
That was my sense exactly, and you got there almost in lockstep with the way that I got there. This matchup for Foreman is also very favorable, right? Second most fantasy points allowed this season to the running back have come from the Seattle Seahawks. We've seen the Panthers really lean into their ground game. They've been running a lot of jumbo sets over these last handful of games. So that volume and a favorable matchup. It feels weird to say out loud, but it's Foreman for me.
All right, so we're together on that one. Stevenson, Foreman, and before we get back to the DFS, I'm gonna use this time to monopolize you for a question of my own because I'm struggling with a Foreman one myself. I think I've decided, but I want to hear your take on it as well. So I'm in a league. It's not a crucial thing because I'm already in the playoffs, but points and seeding still matters. So it's very RB heavy. So it's a point per 5 yards rushing, and it's half PPR. Oh. And also a bonus for rushing first downs. So Dalvin Cook is one of them for sure. So I need 2 out of 3 of the other ones between Zeke, Swift, and Foreman. So who's sitting there? Right now I got Foreman on the bench.
Oh, that's tricky. So
it's a bad one.
There's a bonus at 5 yards. Am I understanding that correctly? And then a bonus, or rather, a scoring for converting a first down as well.
Right.
I might actually sit Swift there for Foreman.
Yeah, he was the other one I was considering too.
I mean, Really, it's about that first down bonus, right? I think they're in kind of a standard scoring format. They're very very comparable plays, but you look at how Carolina wants to operate their offense tomorrow. It's going to be a heavy dosage of Foreman. I think he's going to get a few more first downs.
All right. Well, thanks. See, look at us helping each other out here. I think I'm going to win the matchup anyway. This is against the last place team that has pretty much lost everybody to injury, and I think is still starting Caleb Huntley against me out of necessity. So, oh no, never mind. Caleb Huntley's not playing this week. Who is it? It's somebody else. They must have replaced Huntley with somebody. Oh well, I'll have to check it out. But thank you for that. All right, so we're going to move on with our DFS slate. Chiefs Broncos. I think this is more about the Chiefs than the Broncos, but Kelsey is the one that stands out to me here as well. Like we talked about before, you're either paying all the way up or all the way down. Kelsey is obviously a top play at his position every week. He is the one, I think he'll be even better this week of how good Denver is against wide receivers. But what about the Chiefs offense for you here? Denver's offense is terrible, but their defense is excellent. And the Chiefs do still have a team total of 26.5, which is pretty high to me against this Denver defense. Are you worried about it at all? Or what pieces outside of Kelsey are you using in this Chiefs game?
Yeah, this is a game that I'm probably going to be, very underweight on, if not almost full fading. Kelsey is certainly the priority here, right? 7.6K. You're basically getting wide receiver one production out of your tight end spot, so you can always make the argument for that. Looks like he's not going to be overly popular. If I was looking for secondary pieces, Isaiah Pacheco might be somewhat of interest.
Yeah.
Really from a pricing standpoint, 5.7K. Denver operates kind of like a run funnel, right? I mean, they're just so stout in their defensive secondary that the running game is where you can really take advantage of them. They're allowing 4.6 yards per carry on the season. So, that would be the second name that jumps out to me, but, really not going out of my way to get into this game overall.
Yeah, I do like the Pacheco call, though. I mean, he's got 70 touches over their last 4 games. And like you said, if, they are determined to use their strength to slow down Mahomes here, I think this could be a nice Pacheco game. He's not involved in the passing game, which is a problem for his ceiling for DFS, but I think you're right. The price is good enough. On the Denver side, there's a couple of plays here, actually, that I'm interested in. Right now, Greg Dulcich is the mega chalk at the tight end position at 3,400. So, I mean, again, if we're on the thing where we're paying all the way up or all the way down, I think this is absolutely the play you do at tight end. We did get a question on Twitter, you and I together, of Dulcich versus Chig Okonkwo, and who you would play in that sense. And you answered Dulcich, and I agree with you, but we can talk about that. I mean, are you in a position, we can talk about the Tennessee game in a bit. Are you in a position where if you need, or I don't want to say need, if there is $700 that you have as a luxury that you can get up to a play, because I think that's the separation of the two of them, right? Chig is 2,700, Dulcich 34, if I'm remembering. If you can get into the next tier of a running back or a wide receiver, is that a dip you're willing to take at tight end and fade that chalk for Dulcich? Or is the sensible play, this is more a cash question, is the sensible play to just stay with the chalk of Dulcich, especially with Cortland Sutton out?
Yeah, in the cash context, it's the latter, right? I mean, we talked at the onset about the guy who was underpriced who pops off last week being very popular the next week. Greg Dulcich is a classic example of that as we head into week 14. 6 for 85 last week, tight end 2. In a cash context, his price is low enough to where there's really no reason not to move off of him. in a tournament context, I mean, if he's going to push rostership like we're seeing projected now, he becomes a pretty clear fade for me. It's funny because as you sort of open the show with having kind of an inaccurate pulse on where rostership would fall, this game really represents that for me. I knew Dulcich would be popular. I didn't think it'd be this popular. I'm also seeing a lot more people trying to find a way to get Russell Wilson involved in their builds, which is not something that I will want to do. But yeah, similar story. Had was kind of surprised to see how popular those two plays were specifically.
Yeah, I agree. That Wilson, I've seen a lot of chatter on him. One more play from this game. I'm curious on your take on it. Are you into Latavius Murray in this one? 5,200 is a nice price. Again, you're banking on the Denver offense and a running back who is playing on a team that is right now a 9-point underdog, I think. Where are you on, where are you on Murray?
Yeah, it's tough, right? I mean, basically, you're with Latavius Murray, even at 5.2K, you're really talking about touchdown or bust, right? To their credit, they have been checking down to him a little bit more than we've seen, at other stops in his career. But you're talking about a team that's carrying a 17-point total. You're really just banking on 50% of their scoring coming from Latavius Murray, and that's always going to represent some risk.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that too. All right, so yeah, you're right. I'm I'm intrigued by the rostership in this game. I didn't expect some of it in this one either. But we move on. We have Seattle, Carolina, and the aforementioned D'Onta Foreman, who we talked about. I think he's an excellent play this week if he fits into your lineups. Averaging almost 20 touches over the last per game over Carolina's last 6. Even without any receiving equity, he's fine. You mentioned the matchup against Seattle, but let's talk about the other relevant Panther here first before we get to Seattle, who's a big-time enigma. But DJ Moore, Darnold is the quarterback, which in theory is the best-case scenario for him out of all the ones that have gone so far. 5,500. Are you into DJ Moore?
I think you can make an argument for it largely based on price. For me, it's probably a little too risky. You mentioned the idea of relying on Sam Darnold. That's always going to represent a bit of heartburn. He's coming off a game where he attempted 19 passes. I talked about how Carolina's really moving to that kind of jumbo run first sort of scheme over these last couple of weeks. So, you're probably not going to see the volume that you want to see. And DJ Moore's probably going to see more Tariq Woolen than anybody else, right? Certainly not going to see a lot of Kobe Bryant out of the slot. Might see, a bit of Mike Jackson, but in reality, DJ Moore has easily the most difficult matchup from a opposing cornerback standpoint as any of the Panthers wide receivers.
Yep. And what are we looking at for rostership here for him? That's kind of where I'm gonna decide where I'm sitting on him. Right now, it looks like he's not going overlooked, which is odd to me. I guess. I guess not with Darnold. Darnold's tough to bank on.
Yeah.
But the Seattle side is even more intriguing because I had a date night with my wife earlier and I saw some news popping up and I didn't get a chance to. I know it's the first one in 6 months, I think.
There we go.
So, I did my best to ignore news and turn the phone around, but I did see while she was in the bathroom, I flipped it over for a second and I saw Kenneth Walker and DJ Dallas, blah, 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 blah. And I didn't turn it on because the waitress came over. So, is there any new news on him? Is there anything definitive? Are they playing? Or is it still a game time? I think
the last that I saw, he was considered a 50-50, like a true 50-50 call to play tomorrow.
All right. So, that's kind of holding our lineups hostage a little bit. So, I mean, I'll ask the question to you first. If they're both out, Walker and Dallas, are you interested in Travis Homer and Tony Jones? And if so, if yes, which one? And in what capacity?
Yeah, I mean, I would probably err on the side of Homer over Jones. Not really excited. Not really going out of my way to roster either of them. I think we see a pretty even split in workload if it boils down to those two. Homer's a player that Seattle likes. They've been kind of developing for a little while. I think he was out with an illness in the last game, so should be wheels up to play tomorrow. I would
Mhm.
I would err on the side of Homer, but in reality, I don't think either of them is really going to see enough volume to register for me.
I agree, and that brings me to the next point here, and that's the Seattle passing game. We're seeing Seattle be pretty pass centric as it is, even with Kenneth Walker in the lineup doing his thing. And I know that I think people might look at this game and see the total, which is 44, and not go nuts to stack it. But the the passing offense is just so concentrated. I'm really actually liking a Geno Smith, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett stack this week. Not the greatest matchup, and again, like I said, not the greatest like game situation to be stacking here, but Geno with Metcalf and Lockett and a Foreman bring back is something I can get on board with in GPP. Is that something that you're looking at?
We are absolutely in lockstep.
Awesome.
Where if I decide not to go with my Brown stack, stacking this game in that exact fashion will be my kind of hold your nose special for week 14. Right? It's not going to feel fun, but I mean Foreman is in such a fantastic spot, and I mean it's exactly the case that you made. Right? I mean all of the passing attempts in this game are going to go to DK Metcalf and to Tyler Lockett, right? So to get such concentration of an offense is something to covet.
All right, awesome. I'm glad to hear some validation on that too, because I'm not seeing crazy rostership on any of these guys. Geno's definitely carrying some, as he should, but the ancillary parts not so much. So I kind of like that for the GPP format. So moving on, Bills Jets, and this is another one that I'm struggling with a little bit. It's kind of in that same sense of Carolina, Seattle, KC, Denver. The over or the team total, excuse me, for Bills Jets is pretty much mirroring KC Denver as far as the team totals go. The Bills are 9-point home favorites. They have a team total of 26.5. Jets have 17.5. I'm going to start with the Jets first because I'm really kind of interested in your thoughts. First of all, the running game is out, especially with Michael Carter looking like he's going to come back. That should be 4 guys now vying for snaps. So the one guy that I really want to talk about on the Jets here is Garrett Wilson, who is playing as a wide receiver 1 with Mike White as quarterback. And his price is still not high enough for the target share he's getting. He's 5,900. Are you worried about the matchup with the Bills at all here, or is he someone that you're still comfortable firing up?
Yeah, color me worried. The specifically at the pricing, it feels like the classic DK trap where they really want you to click the button on them. We've talked about it a few different times over at this point, but this Buffalo defense is entirely different with Jordan Poyer back on the field. Looks like that is going to be the case again tomorrow. We saw Mike White at least generate some opportunities for this team last week, but he certainly didn't look like the version of himself that we saw against the Bears. I think he's closer to last week's Mike White than he was 2 weeks ago, or at least he will be tomorrow. I'm going to have a hard time feeling good about really any of the Jets pieces, and even being clinically underpriced, that includes Garrett Wilson.
So Yes, I agree. And Wilson is the flip side of the Huntley play for me too. I thought, given Mike White's play last week, and the fact that Wilson is looking at a much tougher matchup this week than he has against the Bears and the Vikings, um, I've been trying to shy away from him in cash, and his rostership, which is super high, is trying hard to pull me back in, and I'm trying to resist this. So I want to posit this scenario to you as well. If Mike White, this is a must-win for the Jets, and it's a tough one, but this is a very, very important game for both of these teams. If Mike White struggles early, does he get pulled?
Um, I suppose he could be. I might have a bit of a different take here, but I think the Jets are actually like closer to rebuild / next season evaluation mode than they are to trying to put together a run. Right. I think that they're certainly happy to be sitting where they are from a record standpoint, and if they can make their way to the playoffs, great. But I think once they came to the realization that they need to move on from the player they drafted to be a franchise quarterback, they're really just kind of playing with house money, right? So, with that being the case, I would expect them to want to see, a bit more out of Mike White, before potentially making kind of an in-game swap like that.
All right, cool. I'm good. I'm good on that take too. I'm just, that's a good point. It's definitely a state of the Jets question, because you're right. If they if they are, as you say, kind of feel like they're playing with house money. If they get there, great. If they don't, fine. We'll evaluate White to the end. Then Flacco doesn't see the field again for sure, because they know he's not the one that there's going to be playing quarterback for them next season. So, all right, I'm good with that answer. So let's move on to the Bills here. 26.5 team totals feels nice. It also kind of feels like the Chiefs one, where I'm not rushing to play it, but let's talk about it a little bit. Josh Allen, where are you on the elephant in the room? Josh Allen, QB1 on the season. Or actually, I think he's QB2 now, is he? Has Mahomes passed him? I'll check while you're answering.
Now I'm distracted by this curiosity.
Okay.
I mean, look, 8.3K is a ton to pay for a quarterback. His path to value is always going to be super clear with how involved he is as a runner, specifically how involved he is as a runner in the red zone. When he's not running in the red zone, he's number 5 in the league in red zone pass attempts. Right, so he's got so many ways to score a touchdown to where he certainly can get there fairly easily. Right, at 8.3K, and just kind of a general sort of philosophy around these builds, I like to try to pay down a bit more at the quarterback position. So I'm not going to have much Josh Allen tomorrow, or frankly, really all that often. But he's certainly a solid play on merit alone.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not finding myself getting to Allen. FanDuel is a bit of a different story because of how much less dynamic their pricing is. But I'm not getting to Allen much either. Just for pretty much the reasons you said. Not to mention, this is a strong Jets defense. Allen actually leads the league in interception percentage, which you would not think, given the year he's had. And by the way, the answer to that question, not only is Mahomes number 1, Hurts is number 2. Allen is QB3 on the season now. They're all very close to each other, and each game could tell the tale of how it goes there. And I'm talking, points per game as well. Mahomes is at 25.7, Hurts 25.6, Allen 25.5. So that's going to be a photo finish on who actually finishes as the top dog at the position. I think the receivers we've kind of covered already, with the how we're treating them. But what about James Cook? He all of a sudden took over the lead role there for Buffalo last week, and is sitting at 4,600. He is another one that I had expected to see. I'm not saying he was going to be chalk, but I expected to see a lot more than he seems to be getting right now. He is right now kind of, the rostership is reflecting the same as Miles Sanders, who I've heard no chatter about at all, who's in a pretty good matchup as well. He's less than Dameon Pierce. He's way less than Rashad White, who is sharing the backfield with Fournette. What's your take on Cook? Can we trust him? Because, I mean, if we can do that again, 4,600 feels like a steal.
Yeah, I mean, trust might be a strong word, right?
Yeah.
But, in the context of a 4.6K price tag, there's certainly a lot to feel good about. I don't know what you're seeing on your end in terms of rostership. I see him around 8%. If that's the case, then that's certainly a player that I want to be overweight on, right? The Bills are a team that is carrying one of the higher team totals on the slate. This is a game that I think that they will be leading. Not quite to the same extent that we see with Denver, but the Jets are kind of a pseudo run funnel, right? They're certainly a softer matchup against the run than they are against the pass. So all the more reason for James Cook to see more and more work from a game script standpoint. And last week, he really had that kind of emergent game where he took the lead role in this backfield. So I mean, if he's going to be less than 15%, even when projections settle tomorrow morning, that's a player that I want a lot of exposure to.
Yeah, and it seems like he is. Like you said about 8%. That's definitely what I'm seeing here. And it just feels like I thought it was going to be higher. I mean, I guess I can understand why it's not. Just with a ton of other running backs that we're looking at this week too. But I mean, I don't know. It seems like it's a bit of a gift in this game. But we'll see how that settles in. All right, we're moving on here. Let me just check to make sure. Yeah, we're still going. We got about 15 minutes left to get to these last three games. So if you got your questions, get them in. They can be season long related or DFS related. Anything, we'll take it all. But the next game is one that's going to cause me a coronary tomorrow. Well, maybe it'll be just over painlessly by halftime, and that's Giants-Eagles. It's in New York. Eagles also have a 26.5 team total. Giants at 19.5. So I'm going to do the Giants portion of this because it's going to be quick. I am, unfortunately not playing any Giants in DFS this week. The only ones that really warrant fantasy attention is Saquon Barkley, who has been very, very inefficient lately, averaging 3.3 yards per carry over the last 5 games. The good thing about him is he is unquestionably the workload back. There is still a questionable tag on him, but they do expect him to go. I guess if you're stacking Eagles, which I can see doing, I think you want to try and use him as the bring back. Slayton is the other one, just with leading the team in target share by such a wide margin, but he's got a terrible matchup against Darius Slay or James Bradbury, which I'm still mad they let him get to Philadelphia. So I'm not excited to play any Giants in this game, but that's kind of where I would go. So what about the Eagles side? What kind of interest do you have in this game from both the cash and GPP perspective?
Can I offer up a Giant before we switch over to the Eagles?
You certainly can.
If you're looking to leverage off of Greg Dulcich, Daniel Bellinger returned from having his face broken and saw 97% of snaps, saw a season high for routes run, caught all 5 of his targets for 24 yards. His ceiling is certainly in question, but as a punt tight end option, it's going to be hard to find guys in this 3.3K range that are going to be on the field for almost 100% of snaps.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, you're right. 97% of snaps to routes run. I like it. Maybe that's the way to go. If you want to stack Eagles and you don't want to commit a bunch of money to Barkley, I mean, stack. Bring it back with Bellinger. He's not costing you anything. You're still getting the Eagles upside stack. So I like the call there. I'm going to look into that as well. All right, how about the Eagles?
Yeah, I mean, with the Eagles, it really starts. Well, I'll make the obligatory Jalen Hurts needs to be on the cash game radar every single week statement. If you do want to stack this up, AJ Brown coming off of that monster revenge game against the Titans last week. I see him sitting in the kind of mid single digits, around 7-8% rostership. If that's going to be the case, it'll be a really interesting way to leverage. Breaking news: Ken Walker not expected to play.
All right.
So with Brown, he should see a fair amount of Fabian Moreau. The Giants are kind of shadowing with Fabian Moreau, which is a weird look. But if they're going to do that, it's one of the better matchups to opposing wide receivers out there. So can certainly expect AJ Brown to continue his hot streak, and in that kind of mid single digit rostership, a lot to like there.
That poor guy has had to trot around after CeeDee Lamb and Terry McLaurin in back-to-back weeks, and both of them have obliterated Fabian Moreau. I mean, he plays hard, but he is not in the talent level. A.J. Brown is, I hate saying it, but A.J. Brown is going to go off in this game should they target him heavily. They need Adoree Jackson back desperately if they are going to continue whatever run they're on. And this is, I haven't seen officially, but I don't think he's not expected to play this week. I don't know if he's been officially ruled out, but they need him back for sure. So yeah, I don't see anything standing in the way of AJ Brown in this. Miles Sanders, I think, is okay for this one as well. The Giants have given up the 9th most fantasy points to running backs and over 5 yards per carry. Only thing that holds him back is that the Eagles are such a pass-first team. So, I mean, this will kind of have to be a game script thing for me with Sanders, but at a low rostership, I'm okay sticking him in. There's just some running backs that I like a little bit more than him in that price range. Anything else on this game before we get to the next one?
No, I think that really does it. Eagles D is in play.
It is. The only Dallas has more sacks with that one. Speaking of Dallas, let's get to this one because there's some ways to do this. This is, I need to check the up to the minute spread on this one because it was 18 the last I saw. That's 17.5. There's been some movement the Texans' way with the 18-point spread. So the Dallas is 17.5-point home favorites against the Texans. Davis Mills is back under center, but both Brandon Cooks and Nico Collins are out. So it looks like Philip Dorsett and Chris Moore will man the perimeter at wide receiver, and some form of Amari Rogers in the slot, and Tegan Quatoriano has been playing the most points at tight end for the Texans. So I think either running back is cash playable in this. I think the running backs are the way you want to look in this game. Certainly nothing wrong with the Dallas passing game, but this is the nuts matchup for running backs. Houston has given up the most fantasy points per game. 15 rushing touchdowns in 12 games. So I don't think you can go wrong with either one with how many touches each one is getting. Obviously prefer Pollard if choosing, but he is more expensive. Let me turn it over to you, and I want to kind of run a scenario by you for this one. How are you playing the Dallas-Houston game?
Almost exactly the way that you laid it out. There is scantily anything, flatly nothing to be interested in on the Houston side. For Dallas, if you wanted to get really cute, you can try to speculate as to which receiver might get more garbage time run. Maybe like a Noah Brown or a Michael Gallup, but even then you're really rolling the dice there. So it certainly is the running backs. Tony Pollard coming in at 6.7K. I'm kind of curious to see how rostership projections shake out in the morning. Usually when you see two guys priced around the same price point, in a great situation. Usually, the less expensive is more commonly rostered. So I see Tony Pollard slightly ahead of Ezekiel Elliott right now. But however you want to divide it up, Dallas has attempted almost 38 rush attempts per game in their last three. There's going to be plenty of meat on the bone for both these guys to eat. So, the thing that will really lead me one way or the other is which one is going to be less popular.
All right, so I'm going to take that point and segue right into the next question. I'm glad you said that. And so I'll first of all offer this up. This is as okay as I've ever been with paying up for a defense. And actually, the Dallas defense is coming in at the highest roster, even at 3,800, which is really saying something for them. Still don't like to do that in cash. I mean, cash, you need every dollar is precious, and you need those floor guys for PPR at the skill positions. So I do not need to go all the way up to Dallas. If you have the money, it's fine. I still don't think I'm going to do it. But what do you say to playing both Cowboys running backs with the Dallas defense in a GPP and no Houston bring back? This is a thing I've successfully done with the Eagles, with a Hurts Miles Sanders Eagles D in a similar scenario. Are you good with that? I've asked this of several people. I'm curious of your take.
I think I'm going to get first and foremost to spend $4K on a defense on a slate where the pricing is really tight is something that's going to be difficult for me. They'll be in the pool, but they're not going to be most popular defense by any means. And I'm worried about both of these guys seeing a full complement of touches in this game, right? Dallas is very much so shaping into playoff form and thinking about their postseason aspirations. Like I mentioned before, 38 rushing attempts per game, technically 37.7 over the last three. On the season, they're at 30.8. So, they really have shifted their identity to this ground and pound style. I don't know if they're going to go out of their way to run either of these guys out there when they're, blowing the doors off Houston. So I think that is concern that can be kind of dangled out there for them. So to down on my exposure to that by playing both of them is probably a bit of a bridge too far for me.
So you think you're going to go in with this as the kind of follow the roster ship and see which one, for GPP, see which one is the lesser one there. Okay, cool. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm glad I asked that. All right. So we've got nobody that we're interested in on the Houston side. I will say, if you're the receivers that I mentioned, Moore and Dorsett are minimum priced. That's fine in cash as starters. There's no ceiling whatsoever for GPPs. I would not go there. But I mean, that if that's someone that can fit you, we mentioned way early on in the show, both Jefferson and Amon-Ra St. Brown. If you want something like that, you need to do something like this, which I think is a viable option for cash. All right. Yeah. So moving on, we got about 10 minutes left here, a couple games left to cover. I want to get back to the Huntley thing that I opened earlier in, because I'm really curious on your take. I kind of been chomping at the bit here. So Ravens Steelers, lowest over under on the slate by a good amount. We're looking at a 36 and a half right now. That's really, really low. So I can see all the things that have led me to understand why Huntley is not being higher rostered than he is. The low over under, the cold weather, the strong pass rush of Pittsburgh. Huntley is quite turnover and sack prone as well. So I'm good with it. J.K. Dobbins seems like he's back now too. That's another way that Huntley doesn't rush more if Dobbins is going to be on the field. So I'm good being out on him on cash, and I understand why. So that said, he still does have rushing upside. Is he someone you're interested in GPP?
I don't think that he is. A lot of it has to do with the game environment. I think the only factor that you didn't touch on in terms of what's dragging his projected rostership down, Tyler Huntley had a pretty impressive run filling in for Lamar Jackson down the stretch last season. And in their Week 18 game against Pittsburgh, he put up a game where he threw 2 interceptions. He didn't have any touchdowns. He completed 51% of balls. Even in that game, he ran for 72 yards, and he finished at 8.8 points, right? So, the rushing certainly offers some floor, but, given what we've seen this Steeler defense do now that Watt has returned, given how, generally inept we've seen the Ravens look here, of late. I don't see myself getting to Huntley in a game where they're projected to score in the high teens.
Yeah, I get it, and I mean that was just a miss, really, on my part. With the early thing in the week, I thought he was going to be the play this week, but that does not seem like it's going to be the case. And you just threw in reason number 7 or 8 on top of some other good reasons why. So, all right, well, Huntley looks like we're out on. How about the Pittsburgh side of things? It's again, they got similar team total here. Are you interested in anybody on the Pittsburgh side?
Not outwardly. I mean, kind of like we were saying with DeAndre Swift for weeks and weeks. Najee Harris is going to make us all look very silly at 5.8K at some point.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think this is necessarily that point, but decent enough volume. I'm probably not going to get there. I mean, there's not even really anybody out here that's going to offer a ton of salary relief, right? So you can't really have that argument working in our favor. Maybe if you catch a wild hair and you want to fire up a Pat Freiermuth, his rostership is going to be clinically low. The Steelers have really gone out of their way to fill the Chase Claypool void with Freiermuth. They look to him a lot in the red zone, so he's got some scoring upside. But in reality, there's just not a ton to like about how this game plays out.
Yeah, and even Freiermuth, believe it or not, he had his lowest snap total of the year last week, and he actually played behind. Zach Gentry played 12 more snaps than him. So even that's tenuous at this point now too. So yeah, I'm with you. I think we're pretty much off this game from a DFS standpoint. All right, so let's start to wrap it up here. If you got any last minute questions, go ahead and get them in the chat. I want to talk about Jacksonville, Tennessee quick, and start with Derrick Henry, who is going to be one of the more talked about DFS plays here. We probably should have talked about him earlier, so let's get to him now. So Henry over the last 4 games is averaging 2.8 yards per carry with only 1 touchdown and only 9 receptions. He's 7,900. I mean, that is dirt cheap for Derrick Henry. And if you're looking at rostership projections, people are not afraid to play him. So what is your take on Derrick Henry for this one? I feel myself trying to get to him in cash at 7,900. I think this is a week he's going to get 30 carries, especially with Treylon Burks out. I'm okay with the inefficiency even in cash, but what about GPP?
Yeah, he's certainly more of a cash play to me. From the GPP context, it's really more about the game environment that gives me some pauses. There's not a whole lot that I'm trying to get to, with him as kind of a skinny stack or a little 1x1. But in terms of the skill of the player and his ridiculous price tag, he's a smash play in a matchup against Jacksonville that has allowed the 9th most fantasy points to opposing rushers, right? So this should be kind of December Derrick Henry returning to form, and to get that at 7.9K is just something you can't pass up.
Yeah, and I'll call the Titans Twitter actually posted this. that in 11 games against Jacksonville, Henry has 1,143 rushing yards, which is an average of 103.9 yards per game, and he has 14 touchdowns in those 11 games, which is the most by any player in NFL history. So, that's obviously a homerism stat coming from the Titans website, but it's certainly a tangible one that we can take to our own lineups here. All right, so anybody on Jacksonville for you?
Yeah, I think Travis Etienne's a little bit interesting. The Titans have allowed the 8th most receiving yards per game to opposing running backs, so if and presumably when they're trailing, that certainly presents some opportunity for Travis Etienne. You can take a stab at Kirk. His price kind of annoys me. Like it's just a couple $100 too expensive.
It does. You're right. I mean, I want him to be like 6,100. Then I'm all over him. All right, so we have like 2 minutes left. I want to get to the last game here, which is Tampa Bay, San Francisco, which you really wouldn't have thought this was going to be one of the afterthoughts for fantasy, but here we are. Second lowest team total. It's the only other one besides Pittsburgh, Baltimore that's under 40. We're looking at a 37.5 right now. Bucks go to San Francisco on a short week. I'll be very quick here with what I'm looking at. I like both defenses in this game for both cash or GPP. I'm actually into Christian McCaffrey with Brock Purdy's really, really low average depth of target. I think that fits McCaffrey well in the game plan here. Terrible running matchup for him, but, he got, what was it? He had 8 catches last week. 8 catches for McCaffrey last week. So he's expensive, but I'm okay with him in GPP. Who are you looking at in this game?
Yeah, I like McCaffrey, like you mentioned. The other name that jumps out to me is George Kittle. 4.3K. He's going to be widely overlooked. And he kind of fits that mold of the underneath and over the middle kind of range that we think Brock Purdy is going to be throwing into a lot. And last week, with Purdy in there for at least the majority of the game, Kittle set a season high in routes run, right? So you give them another week of practice to get into timing. I think those routes are going to convert into targets more readily. And, the tight end spot is kind of the counterpunch to a very difficult Buccaneers defense. So I like Kittle to pay off. And, I mean, he might be 1 or 2% rostered. So from a leverage standpoint, an interesting spot as well.
Yeah, and 4,300, that's the cheapest you're ever going to see him. And like you said, it's fifth most fantasy points allowed to tight ends by the Bucs. So you're right. That's how you get them. That is going to do it for us on this edition of the Diehards DFS show. If you want to hear more from me, I'm hopping right over to SiriusXM NFL Channel 88, SiriusXM Fantasy 87 with Bob Harris and Mike Dempsey to talk a little bit more about this with them for a segment. Eric, where can our listeners find you, and what would you like to say to them before tomorrow?
Yeah, you can find all of my stuff at my personal Twitter. It's at FantasyNav. That includes my written work over at drritter.com. That includes all of my college basketball and World Cup coverage with Green Screens Media. That includes me hyping up this show and chatting some DFS for our Saturday nights with football diehards. So yeah, Fantasy Nav on Twitter is where you can find all of that rolled up into one.
Beautiful. And I am at JAC3600. We will be talking to each other tomorrow, so feel free to cut into our conversations and ask any more questions that we didn't get to, or just talk football with us. All right, we are going to sign off. We will see you next week for the Week 15 edition with no bye weeks. And then it's Christmas. And we have the slate is a Saturday, and it's Christmas Eve football. So we'll talk about how we approach that one then. But until next time, for Eric, I'm Jamie. We will see you next week at 9 o'clock Eastern on Saturday night. Thanks for joining, and good luck with your lineups tomorrow.